Hello and welcome to this video and to March's book review. But March is reading, well, I read 6 books this month in ways that I don't normally as well, so I'll go into that with you. So without further ado, because I only have like 3 that I can hold up for you, but without further ado, we'll get into the reading. So the first book I read in March was You Are Here by David Nicholls. This is the most recent David Nicholls release, and I don't know if you can, oh no, it's the shelf that you can't see, but I've got all of the others. I've read all of his books. If you're interested in Sweet Sorrow, that's currently on my Vinted because I didn't like it, and that was the one that came out before this, so I was apprehensive going into this one. But I really liked it. I gave it 4.5 stars, which for me is a very high rating. So this is following Marnie and Michael. Both are single, and their friend is trying to set them up with someone. So she brings together a group of people to go on a hike. So they're doing the Wainwright walks, trails, essentially from east to west across the UK. So going through like the Lake District and Yorkshire Dales, that across that way, which is Michael's passion. But this friend also brings along some other people. The woman that she initially brings for Michael just doesn't come, and the man that she brought for Marnie leaves early. So these two are sort of left together, and they end up doing the hike together, and as you can kind of imagine, a relationship develops from there. I liked Marnie and Michael as characters. Marnie more so. I feel I have a fair amount in common with her. I liked them as characters. I liked the fact that they were flawed but not irritatingly so, or not. The book didn't like hook on to those flaws, but they were there. They just felt like real normal human beings with good bits, bad bits, and all the bits in between. The fact that they're doing this trek I often quite like, and this one was done well. Some of the areas I vaguely know, but not well enough that I judged it for that, and I quite enjoyed the fact that they were walking, so that's how they just got into some of these conversations which may or may not have come up with strangers. So I like that's how they sort of developed their relationship. They obviously started off as never met before, didn't particularly like each other really, and then it grew from there as they go through all of the difficulties and also boredom of trekking with each other. I really like David Nicholls' writing anyway. As I said, I've read all of his books. I have read all of his books. His writing style to me is just one that I can really get involved in. He tends to have characters that I quite like. The storylines tend to be something that I'm interested in. There's a few obviously that aren't quite so keen on, but on the whole I really like it. Plus they have short chapters, which I'm a big fan of, because, and even more so now, if I'm doing a load and then I'm like, right, I've got 15 minutes till I have to get Eloise up from a nap, I can easily read a chapter in that, and I like that a lot. So the reason this got 4.5 stars for me instead of 5 stars is because when they were together and when they were doing this walk, it was really entertaining. I was really into it, I was really invested, but inevitably there's a period where they're not together, and then the book sort of took a nosedive and it felt a bit flat and a bit disjointed and a bit, if it was like that for more of it, it would have got even less than 4.5 stars. Thankfully it wasn't too long a stretch, but it sort of lost its spark, which is a shame. And then the ending for me personally was a bit disappointing. It was a bit ambiguous. I would have liked to have known one way or the other. So yeah, that's why it lost the half star for me. Thankfully it was a very short part of the book. It's just a shame it was the end of it, so that's why I got 4.5. But that is You Are Here by David Nicholls, and I've got this really irritating like tickle in my throat, and I don't know why. It's only just started as soon as I started talking to you. But the next book that I read was The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is a romance with a magical realism element, and that one is the fact that our main character Clementine, she inherits her aunt's apartment but sometimes when she goes in that apartment, it's 7 years in the past and there's another man who's staying there. Her aunt has let him stay there for that summer while she's travelling, but that's 7 years in the past, so Clementine is forming a relationship with that man. But obviously, how's that going to work when they don't actually live in the same time? They do, but they're not in the same time at that point. So the reason I picked this one up, this technically would be my book club pick for the month. So you know, I've got my 4 challenges. You Are Here would be classed as a gift because I borrowed that off Pete's aunt. This would technically be my book club pick, although my book club actually read The Dead Romantics, not this one, but I've already read that, so I thought, why not swap it out for another Ashley Poston? As you know, I didn't actually make that book club meeting anyway because I had the stomach bug. And if you didn't know that, I'll link the video where I talk about it out there. But yeah, that's why this is my book club pick, because it's off from the same author. I gave this one 4 stars, which I think I gave The Dead Romantics as well, but I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoy Ashley Poston's writing. I think the concepts that she comes up with are very interesting and new and a fun way of doing a romance that isn't your typical. So I preferred the storyline of this one compared to The Dead Romantics, but I missed the family dynamics from The Dead Romantics in this one. In this we are very much just with Clementine and I can't remember his name. Yes, this is very much focused on Clementine and our male main character whose name I cannot remember, which is really frustrating. Have I written it down anywhere? No. So I missed that in this. Other bonuses to this book is it's got some really interesting food descriptions and things like that, and talk of food because our male one character is a chef. It didn't feel like there was a third act breakup, and as you know, I'm not a fan of those, so I very much appreciated that in this. And I really liked how the past and the present, so the 2 timelines, entwined. It was never unclear where we were, but they were very much linked with each other, which was fun. In terms of themes, there's a heavy theme of grief within this book, so if that's something that you don't want to read about at this time, I wouldn't pick this one up. The aunt whose apartment she inherits has obviously passed away, but some of our other characters also have aspects of grief that they're going through. Linked to that is suicide. Again, if that's something you don't want to read, I wouldn't pick up this one. But the reason it got 4 stars is because it took a while to get into it. Now I don't know whether that's because of my doing or because of the book, because I was reading like 3 books, so this one and 2 others, and I don't know whether that was the case for this one or whether it does just take a little while to get into it. So that's possibly where it lost its star. I would recommend the book, and I would definitely recommend Ashley Poston as an author. Certainly these romances with sort of magical realism elements. Very much looking forward to getting my hands on a novel love story, because I think that one sounds really interesting too. And I think she has one coming out this year, but we'll stick with the ones that are going to be in paperback first. So would be really interested to read that one. We'll continue reading these. As I said, they are very enjoyable and they're a good twist on the romance genre. But coming off my 4.5 with You Are Here, this one felt slightly flat because of it. So that is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Now I said that I was reading 2 other books at the same time as that, so those are the ones I'm going to share now. So the 3rd book that I read, I actually listened to it in audiobook, was Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. This was narrated by Ray Porter. Again, if you've been following these videos since the beginning of the year, you'll know about my Kindle, and there's books on there that I need to get through because my Kindle's dying, essentially. This is one of them. So I was having a existential crisis about it towards the beginning of March, and was like, how the hell am I going to get through these books? I'm going to have to find a way of maybe having them in other formats, and I was like, I don't really do audiobooks. I'm not very good at it. I like a podcast though, so I don't see why they're different. So this is the thought process that I had, and I only have now a couple that I actually listen to podcast wise, because I'm sort of going off some of the other ones that I was listening to. So I thought, right, well maybe I should take this time to try and get into audiobooks and do it that way. I have a library card, so that gives me access to Libby, so I decided to find out what was available. And the first one that I came to with these Kindle books, because I was only searching for those, was Silver Linings Playbook. So I listened to that, which is a 7-hour long audiobook. I can't quite do 2 times speed. I think that's a bit too quick. So I think I'd had this on 1.25. I have now up to the one I'm listening to 1.5. But that's a whole other story. So this is the one I listened to. I've but I have seen the film of Silver Linings Playbook. And the only thing I remembered about it was that a man did a lot of running in a bin bag, and then he met a woman and they did a dance. That is very minimal in the actual storyline of this book. There's a whole other stuff about it. There's a heap about American football that I just did not care about. There were like whole chapters explaining the Eagles and all of that stuff, which I just didn't care about. And it took me a while to realise that our main character, despite having seen the film, was in his 30s. I don't know whether it's the way it's written or the narrator, but certainly at the beginning they made him seem very childish. I know that a big aspect of this is that he's going through like a mental health crisis at the beginning and a lot of mental health issues throughout, and part of that is he has severe like memory loss, but I don't see why that then makes him come across as like a 12-year-old rather than a 30, almost 40-year-old. And I don't know whether that's, as I said, the narrator, who had some questionable choices, it has to be said. One of the psychiatrist guy is Indian, and that was difficult at points to listen to him do that. But also I don't know whether it's that was sort of how the author wrote. From what I gather from reading other reviews, Matthew Quick writes quite a lot of YA, and this was his like first adult novel, so maybe that's part of the reason too. But yeah, what was coming out and the actual age of our character didn't seem to fit. Other things that made me feel slightly uncomfortable is there's quite a few sort of derogatory terms thrown about in this book, but for no apparent reason really, against both the Indian community, the black community. It wasn't the best book in the world. I think I gave it 3 stars in the end. I'm glad I did it by audio, because I don't think I would have enjoyed reading it physically anyway, reading it on my Kindle, purely because of the sheer amount of football chat that was going on. I think I would have found that really tough. So glad I did it by audio. The intention was then to actually read something else on my Kindle, but in the end it turned out this was the only book I read off there, so although it did work in terms of I got through one of them, it didn't work in the fact that I then didn't get another book read. But yeah, so that's Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick, and one that I wouldn't really recommend. Just watch the film. And then the other book that I was reading alongside those was A Good Place to Hide a Body by Laura Marshall. So again, as you know, I'm part of a book club. I'm part of a Discord for that book club, and one of the sort of channels on there is a read along, so you read a chapter or 2 a day, and the book for that month was A Good Place to Hide a Body. I thought it sounded interesting. It was available on my library, or in my library, so I requested it and I got that one through, so I thought I'd join in. So it meant that I read 2 chapters a day, but these chapters were even shorter than the David Nicholls one. Like 2 chapters was like 10 pages in some instances, which was helpful because I read a lot of it on my like lunch break at work. I just quickly read my 10 chapters between meetings or whatever. 10 chapters, 2 chapters. But I think this book would have been better off reading it in bigger chunks. So in this one we are following, I think her name's Penny, who is that sandwich generation. So her parents are aging, but she's got like a teenage son, and she gets a call one day from her dad saying, come over quick, we've got a body in the garden, basically. And then you follow that story as it unfolds and as they find a good place to hide a body. So yeah, I think it would have been better if it was read in bigger chunks, because it was so farcical. Some of the things that happened in this book, you're like, there is no way that would ever be a thing. And they then got a bit tedious. So at the beginning of the book, we're following how we got to the fact that there was a body. So for the first 150 pages, and the instances of those got a bit boring, because it's like, yeah, sure, we get it. And then the latter half of the book, it was about them trying to hide the body, and again, instances in that got a bit tedious, because you're like, this isn't accurate. Whereas maybe if you've read them in the bigger chunks, it might not have felt like that. Saying that though, the writing was super easy. It was one of the easier books I've read this month. Not that any of them were that difficult, but it was certainly the easiest. And I mean, it was entertaining enough that it made me continue. This one I ended up giving 3 stars as well, because it's supposed to be a bit like a thriller. There was no twists at all. The pacing was well off, as I said. It was almost like the author was like, oh, I've got no ideas now, and then quickly switched it up, just went, now we're doing that, and you're like, what? It seems like she just had loads of ideas but didn't really know how to put them together. It felt like she just sort of shunted 2 novels together at one point. So yeah, interesting read in the terms that I would never have picked it out without this read along. I didn't even know it existed without this read along. I am interested in carrying on doing those, and in fact they've just picked the book for next month, and I'm going to join in with that as well. It's an entirely different genre and different thing, and not one that I would normally pick up, which is why I wanted to be involved. But the book itself was it wasn't the best book I've ever read, but it wasn't the worst. It was entertaining enough. I probably wouldn't recommend it. There are much better examples of that kind of work and that kind of genre, but fun enough. And it was fun to be in a Discord where people were sharing their thoughts and their guesses at where it was going, and then just towards the end, just their sheer lack of interest in how it was going. I was probably one of the more positive people about the book than a lot of people in that Discord. But yeah, that was A Good Place to Hide a Body by Laura Marshall. So the next sort of self-induced prompt that I have is to continue a series. So I read Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynne Barnes. I wasn't sure whether this actually continued a series. It sort of does, sort of doesn't. It is linked to the Inheritance Game trilogy. You do have to read the Inheritance Games trilogy before going into this, but also it's sort of the start of its own thing-ish. And I gave this 3.5 stars. I didn't like it as much as the Inheritance Games trilogy. It lacked some of the puzzles and interaction of the brothers that I like from that. So I won't be keeping this one on my shelves. I'll be keeping the 3 of them, but I don't feel the need to keep this. In this we have the point of view of Grayson Hawthorne and Jameson Hawthorne, but the 2 stories don't really link with each other. I think that's my issue with it. I feel like it should have just been 2 different books. I feel like we should have had Grayson's book, and I feel like we should have had Jameson's book. In Grayson's side of things, he is trying to look out for his sisters from his biological father, as they try and work out where he's gone. I won't say any more than that, because there's a whole aspect in the trilogy that you need to know for that bit. And then for Jameson, he is part of a underground game thing for the rich and famous in the UK, trying to compete there. So as you can see, they don't really link. I personally preferred Grayson's side of thing. although Jameson's did have the game element, which I like from these books. For me, and this is going to be a very short review, kind of don't see the point in it. Lacked the whole puzzle aspect that I really like from the trilogy. And I mean, Xander's my favourite brother and he was barely in this book. Avery was barely in this book. So fun to begin with to be from their point of view, but quite quickly I was like, this doesn't really have a point and these two books don't link and they shouldn't be together. They don't ever come together, which is frustrating. It is the setup for another book, which I think is called The Grandest Game, which I possibly might be interested in reading, but probably one that I would look at either cheap in a charity shop or on my Kindle or from the library. But yeah, this one I won't be keeping on my shelves. Kind of disappointed in it actually, but I mean, it took me a while, it's quite chunky, but it was fine. It was just fine. 3.5, Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynne Barnes. And then the last book that I read this month was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is the first book of Taylor Jenkins Reid that isn't like those decades ones, so your Evelyn Hugo's, your Daisy Jones, that I have read of her. So this is going backlist for me. And this is following Lauren and Ryan, who have been together for like 13 years. They're married, and then they realise that they've essentially fallen out of love, and what are they going to do? So they decide to separate for a year, go completely no contact with each other, can do what they want for that year, and then they'll see where they get to at that point, and whether they want to carry on being together or whether they want to be apart. And with that concept, I wasn't entirely sure I was going to like it, because I have a bugbear about sort of like cheating and stuff in books, and I wasn't sure whether we were going to be going down that route a bit for this book. But Taylor Jenkins Reid does such a good job at writing novels and characters, and I want to read everything that she writes, because it's just really good. This again was a 4.5 star for me, and that surprised me because, as I said, when I reread the blurb I was a bit like, why did I pick that one up? That doesn't sound like something I'd particularly enjoy. And maybe the reason I enjoyed it quite so much is because it felt quite close to home, because myself and my husband Pete, we have been together for a very long time. The characters in this met when they were 19. I was 20 when we met. They're obviously married, we're married, they have a dog, we have a dog. The only thing that's different is we now have a child, and we haven't, fallen out of love and want to split up for a year. But it felt quite close to home, so I feel like everything that Lauren was going through, I could really put myself in her position and I would probably react in very much the same way. And that just made this I just connected with it really well and really wanted her to find contentment, I guess. Not necessarily like exuberant happiness, but contentment was the thing I really wanted for her. As I said, I just really enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed getting to know Lauren's family, and sort of some of the things that were there, but also them coming to terms with the fact that Ryan isn't with them, because obviously he'd been with them for so many years and been with them, grown up with them, because he'd been there since he was a teen, well, late teen, early 20s, and just that sort of aspect of things as well. And yeah, I just really enjoyed how this was put together. And yes, they do have other partners during the time that they're apart, but the way that, again, that it's written doesn't feel cheap, sordid, uncomfortable for me. Certainly with Lauren, the person that she is with, and skip ahead if you don't want to know anything about it, but the person that she ends up being with is going through a very similar situation, so they are there mutually for each other's enjoyment rather than forming a relationship or anything like that. I mean, one may or may not have come from it, and they're so adult in the way that they discuss it and all of that kind of stuff that I just really enjoyed it. The reason it's a 4.5 for me is the ending. It's the ending that you expect. And for me, that kind of was a bit like, I wish you'd taken it somewhere I didn't quite expect. Which maybe is me just being a bit too picky, but I tend to be with books. But yeah, I just wanted this to go somewhere slightly different with it. I didn't want her to take quite such an easy route with the ending. But yeah, really enjoyed it. So that's After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So that's all the books that I read in March, and as always I tend to give you my favourite and my least favourite. So my favourite was probably this one. You Are Here is a very close second, but I think this one just pips it. And then my least favourite, probably Silver Linings Playbook, although this was probably my most disappointing, because I sort of anticipated that Silver Linings Playbook wouldn't be quite for me, but I thought I might like this one a lot more. So probably The Brothers Hawthorne is my most disappointing for the month. So yeah, I'm both excited and apprehensive about April. I think I'm going out of my comfort zone quite a bit this month with the books that I'm looking at to read. So if you're interested in those, do click that subscribe button, because I'll obviously be here next month. If you've enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up, and if you have any comments about the books that I've read, put them in the box below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!